Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a concept that sounds like it's pulled straight from a sci-fi blockbuster, but it actually represents a very real theoretical frontier. We're talking about humanity taking absolute command of the sky, literally becoming the architects of our own atmosphere.
It's the ultimate what if, isn't it? Imagine waking up tomorrow, and the weather is no longer something you just have to endure. What if you could literally schedule rain, like a package delivery, or soften a brutal heat wave with just the tweak of an algorithm?
Because think about it, for the entirety of human history, weather has been this unpredictable giant standing over civilization. We build massive, sprawling cities and launch satellites into space, but we still have to bow down to rain, wind, and ice. But this breakthrough? It would transition the weather from a chaotic force we're totally helpless against into a living machine we actively command. It kind of sounds like the ultimate answer to nature's chaos.
Which brings us to Phase 1, the ultimate climate miracle.
Okay, let's dive into this, because controlling the sky isn't just flipping a giant master switch, it's an insanely complex web of technologies. We're looking at advanced AI modeling that can predict and nudge weather patterns, paired with massive physical interventions, things like advanced cloud seeding, atmospheric heating, reflective aerosols, and wind redirection. Together, all of this forms a unified, planetary weather control network.
And honestly, the initial rollout of this network would feel like magic. Right out of the gate, regional pilots would deliver mind-blowing benefits. Imagine dry farms finally getting targeted rainfall exactly when the crops need it. We're talking about proactively cooling down entire cities right before a deadly heat wave strikes. We could gently steer hurricanes away from densely populated coastlines, refill drought-stricken reservoirs on command, and just weaken massive winter storms before they can take down the power grid. It means safe supply chains and basically preventing natural disasters before they even start.
The contrast here is just staggering. Humanity before this tech lives in a constant state of vulnerability, always anxious about unstable weather ruining crops or destroying homes. But humanity after? Total security, stable food production, uninterrupted economies. It would really feel like civilization had finally won a long, exhausting war against the sky.
But then, we hit part 2, the butterfly effect.
Here is where the miracle meets a really harsh physical truth. The atmosphere isn't a machine with neatly isolated parts. It is a giant, interlinked, nonlinear system, meaning a single adjustment in one area creates these cascading, totally unpredictable consequences hundreds or even thousands of miles away. The hidden cost of messing with large ecosystems is that they remember, they adapt, and they absolutely do not forgive arrogance.
And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying domino effect of playing God. Let's say, step 1, you use the network to cool a city during a dangerous heat wave. Super noble goal, right? But step 2, that local cooling shifts the regional wind currents, which then leads to step 3, you just unintentionally caused a devastating drought 1,000 miles away. Oops. The more power we gain, the more we discover that every correction creates massive new consequences somewhere else.
Which leads us to a very dark reality in Section 3, weaponizing the sky.
Once weather becomes something we can negotiate, billions of lives are suddenly at stake. Let's break down who's sitting at this table. You have wealthy nations whose goal is climate resilience, but the huge risk is they just monopolize the tech. Then you have poorer nations fighting for basic survival, terrified of downwind deprivation. I mean, what happens if your neighboring country literally steals your rain? And finally, global militaries. Because once weather is controllable, it is 100% militarizable. A nation could degrade an opponent's supply lines with prolonged fog or blistering heat and never have to fire a single shot.
It forces us to ask these really provocative questions that we just don't have a legal framework for yet. Seriously, who owns the rights to a cloud? Who decides if a storm should be softened or allowed to run its course? Every single decision about the weather would suddenly expose the deepest moral and political inequalities on Earth. Because if you can choose whose lives are made safer, you are also choosing whose lives are put at risk.
And think about the cities of the future. They would become entirely dependent on this hidden layer of digital and atmospheric infrastructure. Sure, you would never have to check a weather app again, but what if the system is hacked? Or what if it's just miscalibrated? A single digital failure could unleash catastrophic instability over a whole metropolitan region in minutes. The very thing built to prevent disaster could instantly become the cause of it.
And that brings us to the 4th point, the end of seasons.
So the crucial point here is, what happens when humanity becomes completely obsessed with our own constant comfort? Human preference is obvious.
We want perfect seasons. No extreme heat, no brutal cold, just 72 and sunny all the time. But ecological reality operates completely differently. Habitats don't thrive on perfection. They evolved under variation. Seasonal change isn't a nuisance. It is literally the pulse of the living world.
If we flatten out those weather patterns just to optimize our own convenience, the natural world becomes the victim. We'd see completely disrupted bee and insect life cycles. Bird migration patterns would be a total mess without natural seasonal cues. Flowering cycles, soil moisture, freshwater flows, all of it disturbed. Nature would be forced to adapt to our polished, artificial preferences, or it would simply die out.
And honestly, we lose something inside ourselves too. There's a quote from the source material that really hits the nail on the head. Weather has always been one of the last great shared experiences of humanity. If we never have to prepare for a storm, if we never wait for that first smell of rain after a long, dry season, do we lose our sense of awe? We might become incredibly efficient, sure, but spiritually much smaller, disconnected from the very planet we actually live on.
Which brings us to our final point, a test of human wisdom. Now, what's really interesting about this is the extreme tension at play here. On one hand, the humanitarian potential is extraordinarily high. We could literally end climate-driven famine and save millions of lives. But on the other hand, our reliability when it comes to human governance is historically, well, inconsistent. We are absolutely brilliant at inventing godlike tools, but we are notoriously terrible at governing them fairly.
Because the blunt reality is that the real danger in this scenario isn't the weather itself anymore. It is the people managing the weather. The atmosphere might be programmed for perfect balance, but the human world is full of fear, secrecy, profit motives, and fierce competition. Any of those human flaws could easily turn a life-saving miracle network into a literal planetary threat.
Ultimately, surviving our own technology would come down to choosing between two paths. Domination, which means total control, treating nature like a service app with a polished interface. Or partnership, using extreme caution, demanding global transparency, and guiding the weather only when absolutely necessary to prevent real suffering, while still honoring how incredibly complex the living world is.
Which leaves us with this. The sky would no longer just be above us. It would literally be in our hands. And that power is going to test whether we are wise enough to actually deserve it. So, what do you think? Would controlling the weather be our greatest gift, or just the first step toward a world we can no longer predict? It's a profound thought to leave you with today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible world around us.